there's so much power in allowing for solitude and stillness, time in nature, to find the practices that resonate with each of us.
Hello, my dear. Welcome back to the Darren Well podcast. What do you do when your body does not feel safe? So it doesn't feel safe within, safe to let go of past hurts, safe to feel at peace, safe to just pause and to slow down. Today, we're going to talk about wellness from a different perspective of movement. So we hear so much about mindset, but I want you to start to think about like ways to let go. But today I want you to think a little bit differently. We're going to talk about body awareness. Sometimes we think about ways to be more positive, ways to mentally try to let go of things, ways to set healthier boundaries. But what happens when your mind knows exactly what to do, but your body still says, nope, not yet? So today I'm talking with Veronique, and she is an intuitive movement and mindful awareness guide. She's the author of Shine On and Off the Mat, and she's the founder of the Shine Collective. Her story of overcoming substance use, perfectionism, failure. I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I'll just say that for me. Failure, overcoming all the identities that once defined her. But also now she's shifted into a new way of living that's rooted in slowing down, rooted in reconnecting, and learning to listen to the wisdom of her body. So I'm excited for our guest, Veronique Ory, to share about the missing link in wellness and the felt safety, and why why we can't just stop just there with mindset. We got to go a little bit deeper. Again, welcome, Veronique. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. Welcome. How are you today?
Thank you, Rita. I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Yeah.
So tell us about the book. So I'm curious about what inspired you to write the book, Shine On and Off the Mat, and then what inspired you to launch the Shine Collective, and what is the Shine Collective?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been so attracted to language. I grew up in a house where there was Hungarian on my dad's side with him and his parents, and then French on my mom's side, and then, of course, English. And my grandfather, he just loved to tell stories, and some of my earliest memories were gathering around the kitchen table, sharing stories and laughing. And I just always felt like this is our human alchemizer of how we bridge our differences, how we move through the hard times. You know, whether we're at a wedding or a funeral, or we're gathering in a place of celebration or grieving, we always come together in the sharing of the stories where we might be laughing, we might be crying, but we like move through these emotions. And I think it's so important to highlight that all emotions are welcome and they're normal. And so just want to say from the beginning, this is not a space to bypass the uncomfortable. Actually, what I would invite everyone listening into is to lean into the sensations that are coming through, because these are really intelligent messengers. And so when I came to really delving into the yoga practice, I was always really interested in the why. Why are we moving our bodies in this way? There's certainly physical benefits. I've always been an artist from a young kid. I love theater. I love physical expression, which is dance, but also like a little bit like weird and quirky. Like I'm definitely that person in the grocery store. If like the song comes on, like I'm dancing and I don't care. You know what I mean? And so I just feel yeah, it's like, can we just express ourselves in a way that feels like an uplift, you know? And so I really felt like that was something that really helped me in my yoga practice of like forward folding and the letting go, or like if I feel like I'm gripping onto a thought, I'll physically grip and then like really intentionally release. And so there's just so many somatic practices where we can help metabolize the emotional weight of our life sometimes, like that are like it gets like like buried so deep sometimes. And so when I was teaching group classes all over town, when I first started teaching, I really loved weaving that story piece into my classes. I would have a little talk at the beginning of like a universal, what I would call a mind meal. So just like a little kernel of something for people to think about while we were moving. So, for example, I had a guest that was staying with me at one point, and she had this like, I don't know if you've ever had someone stay with you, or like maybe someone that lives with you that has this habit of like they'll drink a little bit of the thing in the glass and then they'll set the glass down somewhere but then forget. So then they'll go and get another glass, and then by the end of the day there's like 5 glasses in different spots in the house with like this much beverage. And it was driving me crazy, but of course I want to be a gracious host. So, and so part of that yoga sequence that week was, how do you sort of feel that contraction? And so we had like these physical movements of like drawing in, and then we would like really exaggerate the expansiveness of letting that go. Of how like when someone can come into our space and we feel like, oh my gosh, I feel so claustrophobic. Will this person ever leave? I can just get my house back. And then it's like, oh, actually, I can embrace that energy right here and right now. I don't have to have this exterior thing to change in order for me to change. And so that was just an example of like one of the things. And so what ended up happening was many of my students would see me around town and they would say, we think about your stories throughout the week and how it really stays with us. And we kind of like process it in different ways. And, have you ever thought about writing a book? And, that was said to me probably a dozen times before I finally thought maybe I should, write these stories down. And so it started off kind of like a memoir. Like I thought, oh, I'll just kind of jot these stories down. And then COVID hit. And I thought, well, here's an opening to write my book. Like all of a sudden, everything got canceled and closed and we all kind of tucked in. There was one studio in town that pivoted very gracefully and shifted to Zoom, but everything else got shut down. And so I thought, okay, this is actually a moment for ingenuity. In this space, what do I seek to cultivate? And so what I really thought was a huge opening was actually there are many reasons, even when the studios are open, where people don't go to yoga classes. And so what an opportunity to create a book that has an interactive piece where people could actually practice anytime, anywhere, and have that self-inquiry, because, so much science behind the mind and body connection. And sure, you could roll out your yoga mat and do the shapes. When we integrate the mind meal piece and the self-inquiry and connect to our why, then we become infinite. Then we can do anything. We can process, and like the triggers, like I think of it, we have this like superhero cloak, and like the things, they can't burrow the way that they would if we weren't awake to what our experience is and how we can filter that through.
That's good. That's good. That's cool. I love the mind meal. I think that's really cool about your My Dear and Will story. So walk us through. So people sometimes think, okay, well, we all woke up this way. We woke up calm. We all woke up regulated, and not understanding like there was a whole journey to get to this point. And so share a little bit about your My Dear and Will story. So your journey of overcoming substance abuse, your journey of overcoming feelings of failure or identities that you had to shift from, perfectionism. So share a little bit about those pieces of your story and how that gave you the motivation to shift.
Yeah, I mean, so much to share there.
Yeah. Like 25 stories. How do I condense it?
Yeah, I mean, very early imprinting of intergenerational trauma. Being a granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, there were tempers in the home. There was a lot of screaming and violent words. And so I grew up with almost like this moment of like my sympathetic nervous system response was always freeze. So there'd be like an explosion and I would just like brace for impact. And what's so important to highlight in these like early imprints is like these become like really like woven into the fabric of our being, or they can, right? And so what's so important about being in the here and the now is we can look at the earliest memory of what that response is to better understand when a similar trigger shows up here and now, it's not that person. Like it is, but it's also the root of where it originated. And so what's so impactful about this work is we can go back and be in conversation of what happened and recognize that the child version of ourselves was reacting in a way to protect us. And so that response is from a space of seeking comfort and to feel at peace, to feel safe. And so what's so important about recognizing that is, okay, in the here and the now, how can I establish safety? How can I breathe with what is? How can I forgive the people in my life that were doing the best that they could given their current circumstance, so that I can arrive to the here and the now and it doesn't continue to weigh on me. And that's a forever process. I think I would be misleading people to say that I've arrived and nothing triggers me. Like I'm still human. There are moments where it'll be like, wait, I thought I processed this. Can I just be done responding in this way? But I think it's so important that we're given opportunities to practice this over time, because we start to find a mastery around moving through the discomfort. There's such a fallacy in we're in such a hyper comfort modern society of, depending on where you are in the world, there's so much that's available at our fingertips. Like you have a thought for the thing, add to cart, it's here, as soon as now, basically. The temperature, if we're hungry, like all of these things that we kind of are searching to not be in discomfort. And so when even the slightest bit of discomfort shows up, we want to eradicate it as quickly as possible versus actually sitting with it. And so this is so important, I think, when we look back to where we've been to arrive to where we are. There were years where I really sought not to be uncomfortable, and that became my hyper vigilance, my hyper independence, my perfectionism of, I'm graduating high school early, and then I'm graduating college early, and I'm starting a nonprofit at 22 years old, and I'm I'm just working so hard as if I'm gonna die by 30. I was just trying to maximize every moment. I remember there was a time when I was maybe 24. I was living with a roommate and he's watching a movie, and then he's like, could you just not be so productive? Because I would come home, I would beeline it past the living room where he was watching a movie, and I would go to my room and I'd just be working on my computer because I just wanted to be active all the time. I wanted to be in the creation of something all the time. And I said to him, I can't. For me, this is fire in my belly, must be creating something.
So this success-driven identity is kind of what is driving or was driving. this need to perform, this need to create?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about this often. It's like if you can like imagine yourself at like 5 years old, or even like if you could like possibly have a memory of yourself at like 2 years old, this like very like impressionable, like sweet, like lovey version of I mean, like we're still that way, but but like just like smaller. Like, you take your first steps and you get applause, and then like you might do like a cute little dance, and then you get like the like, oh, like you're so cute, like good job. And then we like arrive to adulthood, and then we're like seeking like our own version of applause, of like how do we get that dopamine hit, or like it like becomes like a high of, okay, like if I do this well, then I'll get like a certain response. For some of us, it swings the other way, where we like aren't getting the response and we don't know how to do the achievement. And so that might be the path of the person who, ends up in jail or like commits a crime and is like trying to get these attentions. And so we might like act out in rebellion, or we might be in that like overachievement kind of like perfectionism kind of track. And, there might be like the people in the middle that are like, I'm just, showing up to my job, and then I like come home, and then I like don't do anything. But I think like for most people, like there's kind of like extremes where we like, I mean, the truth of it is we are addictive beings, just that is human nature. And so that's why I think it's so important to just recognize where we are on that spectrum, and then start to be in just like really honest relationship to what feels holistically helpful, right? And oftentimes when we're on a track and we're moving at a certain pace, like I liken it to, say, like you woke up tomorrow and you thought, I'm going to run a marathon today. You would have adrenaline kick in, and like you'd have your friends and family cheering you on, and it probably would not be until you stopped running where you realize like your legs are jelly, your heart is leaping out of your chest, you like probably need medical attention. And I think that happens to a lot of us, like type A, like overachiever, perfectionism kind of folks, is that we are like go go go, we're like on our marathon of our own design that like actually doesn't have an end point until like we expire. And so it isn't until we're either sick, or there's a global pandemic, or maybe some kind of natural disaster, or like maybe like a major death in the family, that will force us to stop. And it's usually then, which is like not a way that we would choose to have that reckoning, that we like fully recognize, oh, this is actually a pace that's not sustainable, and the physical body will shut down when we're not in alignment with a way that feels actually in support of our longevity. Right. So that's, I mean, like there's like so many pieces to say about that, but I definitely in my adulthood tried different forms of dulling that, just to try to push through. I'm not perfect. I've definitely faltered and like come back and like faltered again and come back again. But having more awareness and being more awake for the times that I choose to dull a little bit. But it's so important to have a mindfulness around it, so there isn't like shame and the guilt spiraling all together in this like cocktail of our own making, but rather, okay, like in this human experience, I am doing my best within my current circumstances, and from that's all that I know to move forward. And really we can better have grace for others, knowing that we're each doing that in our own way.
What was the moment that helped you to shift? Can you think back? And maybe there was multiple moments, but like what was those moments where you're like, hey, this is not healthy. I need to make a change. Like what was those, like, I don't know, walls, or what I often say is come to Jesus moments, where we're like having this reckoning that helps you to say, you know what, I need to make a different change with whether it's perfectionism, whether it's doing different things to numb. So whether it's whatever type of addiction, relationships could be an addiction. Not just only food or substance use, but like what was some of those different little pivotal moments along the way that you learned, hey, I need a shift?
Yeah, I mean, there were so many. It's so funny. I write about one of the major ones in my book of being in New York in 2019. I had already moved down to Florida, and I was running my theater company remotely for the half of 2018 to 2019, and I was really resisting shifting away from theater. That was a huge part of my identity. You know, I told the story countless times of, you know, being 5 years old, performing for my grandparents in their living room, and how I just knew I was destined for theater, and started this nonprofit theater company and operated it in Los Angeles and then in New York City. And this was year 17. And I'm in New York, and it's the first day of technical rehearsals where we're putting together the set and the lights and the projections and all of the technical elements with the actors and the director, and, you know, the whole team is there. And our projection designer who created this beautiful design, and in a lot of ways it was character in the show. I mean, it wasn't just like, you know, like a scene in the background. It was like video and like integrated design, like very complex design. She had a family emergency and had to leave. And this was, I don't know, 5 days before we open. And this is, you know, after like months of preparation. And this is very integral to the show. And, you know, talking about it all these years later, like, this is not a big deal. Like, all things considered, the war in this world, like, this is not a big deal. But in that moment, and I think this is like so important to highlight, is like, we can shame ourselves, like, oh, like, there's starving children somewhere, like, my worry isn't worth, you know, crying about. Like, our worry is worth crying about, you know, because it's ours and we're experiencing it. And like, you know, we can dismiss it all we want, but it's our lived experience. And so there I was, standing on this New York street with a mountain of trash next to us, and like bawling my eyes out, feeling like the world is over, because, you know, so much time and money is poured into this. And when it feels like one of those moments where the rug's just like pulled out from under you, it just feels like, and there were so many moments like this. And I just love to share this because I feel like this is such a universal kind of experience where we pour so much of our heart and our soul and our money and our time into something, and then something happens where it's out of our control and it brings us to our knees, and we just feel like, I can't go on like this. And this was directly linked to my identity around a pride on being a starving artist. And I think that you don't have to be an artist to have a pride around not having money. Like, it's actually like a very common identity of people have an orientation of like, oh, that's frivolous, or someone who has money they have like a negative connotation around them, and so they like keep themselves in scarcity or poverty, because it's like, oh, well, you know, I don't want to like ask for too much, or like I don't want to like take from these people over here. But actually, we're born as limitless beings, and if we all have permission to be in that conversation from this infinite well, then I'm receiving, you're receiving, we're all receiving, and then we pour back in, because it's actually called currency. It's not called water that doesn't move, you know. Like, it's meant to flow in and it's meant to flow out. And so that was like a big moment where I just, through crocodile tears, said to my friend, I'm like, I'm so tired of just surviving. Like, I really am ready to thrive. Like, I really want to thrive. And I couldn't figure that out with acting, with producing, with, rent as high as it is in New York City, and the way, the cost of living is so high in many parts of the world. And so it just started to really sink in of, okay, is this an identity that I want to hold? Right? Like, hand to heart, eyes closed, like if I was like at a dinner party, would I like proudly introduce myself like, hi, I don't have anything, like, like it's a little bit ridiculous in a certain context, but it felt like very much part of this conversation, which I think we hear so much in this space of like shrinking because we don't want to take from someone else, or like, let me just be over here. It's like we want to be seen, but not too much. And so we're kind of like in this sort of dance. And so that, I mean, like that was huge for me, because it was like connected to, I think, intergenerational trauma of like worthiness of this life, worthiness to take up space, worthiness to have equal energy exchange for what I'm offering. And it probably took several years after that, but I do think that was like a really significant seed that was planted, where I thought, it might sound wild, but I think it probably resonates with people listening in, of like, what is the identity that I actually want to hold? Like, how do I feel? Like, shoulders back, like feet on the ground, like proud, right? Showing up in space.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, Veronique. What's the identity that I want to hold? And so, learning from some of those different life moments, how did you learn to understand like what felt safety is? So, how did you learn that for yourself? But also, can you define what that is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if we're living in a place where we have shelter and we have clean water, we have food that's nourishing, and we have people that we love around us that are in direct uplift, this is really important, because we have people who love us, and sometimes the people who love us can be draining, and they can deplete us in different ways, right? So it's not just like being around like blanket statement family and friends. It's actually like, who is your chosen family? Who are you choosing to allow close? And so you can orient like, where is the place? Who are the people? And what are the practices that allow me to feel safe? Not that they make you feel safe, like they're, protecting you, but that you feel like you can soften into your authenticity, and like you're not like trying to be something that you think that they want you to be, or you're like constantly like tiptoeing, monitoring what you're saying because like you want them to be more comfortable. This is a different kind of relationship. And so it takes some honesty, some space to be able to see really clearly, because oftentimes we can just be in the routine and not question it, because it's so much easier to just stay with what is than to question and possibly make a change because of how we imagine they might respond, or how we imagine it might be perceived in our circles. And so there's so much power in allowing for solitude and stillness, time in nature, to find the practices that resonate with each of us. because certainly what feels regulating for me and for you and for each person is different. I can certainly share what feels regulating for me as inspiration, and I really invite people to play with it. Even if you just set a 15-minute timer from the time that you wake up until, if you have more time, that would be ideal, to just kind of feel into, like, if I could do anything right now, what would I do? More often people can say what they don't want to do. Yeah. But to really sit with, okay, like, all is possible. What would I do? That feels like it is safe. I feel calm. I feel peaceful. I feel connected to spirit. And so what I love is to really tap into going outside, getting first light, being in the breath. I love a glass of water with lime first thing. Then I make a nice coffee, and then I walk my dog with my coffee in my hand, and I'm just like looking at the trees. I don't take my phone with me. I don't look at my phone until I've done a certain amount of practices where I feel like I've connected to spirit, to earth, to my breath, to my inner nature. I kind of ask, like, what would you have me know? I like tap into like the energy of the moment, of what wants to pour through me. I really do believe that we are our vessels, that we're in co-creation with spirit, with God, whatever someone believes in. And when we're tapped in that way, then we're tapped into infinite wisdom, into infinite possibility. And so the things that feel weighty in the horizontal plane, whether it's, something with this person over here, something with the place that you live over here, like these things that, it's all impermanent, really. Yeah. And not to dismiss it, because it feels heavy and can be frustrating and annoying, and like you build resentments and angers towards these things. But I think when we can start to just linger in the practices first thing, to really practice that safety. And so if you live with people, like, have a conversation, like, let's just not speak for as long as possible. like why do we have to be like chatting like as soon as our eyes open? It's like, no, we want to tap upwards. Like, don't ask me like what we're having for dinner. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, let's just
sit in the silence.
Sit in the silence. And it's really, really powerful. People will all day long be like, well, I have young children. Yes, young children are very adaptable, and they will learn that this is the practice.
And that's what feels safety is meaning in the body.
And that's I think it's like we want to create space to actually feel that empowerment of how do I resource myself? And we have to get empty and quiet to know what that is for each of us.
Yeah. And I think we don't spend enough time emptying ourselves. That piece, Veronique. I think we spend so much time filling and consuming relationships, consuming information, consuming way too much news. The trauma of that. I think we consume way too much of social media. And so just constantly being a consumer. And so you're filling yourself up with stuff, but you're not emptying yourself. And so I love that, emptying yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So as we start to wrap up, what are some words of wisdom that you have for listeners? I know you talked about some other simple ways that they can learn to regulate and find safety in their body by opening up and creating space for quiet, silence, time in nature. But any other words of wisdom as we wrap up?
Mm-hmm. I feel like we are moving through a pretty significant era of consumption. And part of that is through an intention that actually is from a good place of listening to the podcasts and reading the books and doing the inner work. And what I would really love to invite people listening into is to now take this and take action in a small meaningful way. So it's so tempting in like the world of scrolling. Like we could just be professional voyeurs of like watching other people. And, you know, we were talking about this before we hit record. Like it's called social media, but like a lot of us are just watching. It's like something, comment on something, start a conversation with someone, like actually be social. You know, like if you're going to engage, like actually show up and engage. If you're going to listen to a podcast and something resonates, like write it down and then say like, how can I live this today? And it actually has a really powerful ripple effect. If like the least that you do is share it with someone who you think would find it to be useful, that's a ripple effect. And then the hope is that then you have an accountability buddy and it's like, hey, do you want to be in silence for 15 minutes? Like you call each other, but you like have your phone on, you know, do not disturb. So you're not tempted to like look at the messages or anything. And you're just like silent together. And you're each going through your own process. Or if you live with someone, you can decide we're doing this together as a family. And then you break the silence in a way that feels celebratory. And then just watch what happens as you interact with the world. Like then like everything is more joyful. You know, I saw a couple students yesterday. I went to a group class in town and the woman was like, how's it going? And I was like, it's so good. It's like the best day. And she was like, oh, like what happened today? I'm like, well, it's the day we're having. It's the best day. And she was like, like wish I could think like that. I'm like, you can. Like I just shared it with you.
Special pill for that?
Yeah. I'll just like touch your shoulder and now you have it.
Magic wand. Ta-da!
It's the best day. Which like I actually like I'm not trying to say that as like, you know, whatever. It's like no, like for real.
Yeah. You get to create your own happiness, your own joy.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta make space for it. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's really tempting to be like, when the kids are out of the house, when I finish this, you're like, oh, like when I get a new job, or like when I have the courage to like, you know, start my own business, when. It's now. Do something now. And guess what? Like you'll probably find that the universe conspires to support you. You know, that's the magic of it.
Yeah. Do something now. The power of now.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Felt sense of safety. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Veronique, your story. Thank you for sharing so much about like ways to learn how to feel into the body. So how can listeners connect with you if they want to go deeper in this practice of learning to have this felt sense of safety in their body and movement? Hear about your book. Where can they get the book?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I would love to connect. You can learn more about my offerings on my website, yogawithveronique.com. My book is on there, more about the Shine Collective, which is a membership, it really is a collective. So it's shared practices. So, you know, in the way that you would call a friend and have those 15 minutes of silence, there are different practices like that are intended to be shared with a friend, with a family member, with a loved one, with someone who you feel like you want to share this experience with. And more, I feel like that's what the world needs, is to lean into the places where we can connect and nourish in all of the ways. And that really extends that practice of safety, is when we're sharing experiences that are in the uplift, where we can move through the challenging things, the grief and the heartaches and everything, that we can have open conversation and be vulnerable with one another and still be in the movement in every sense, right? So the physical moving through, the emotional, the spiritual moving through, and that we can do that in shared space is really powerful. So that's that's the whole mission of Shine, is how do we embrace that vibrancy, that vitality through everything that's going on. So if you're interested in that, you can find out more about that on my website. You're also welcome to engage with me on Instagram. I'm at Veronique Ory, and I would love to connect there as well. And the other piece that I just wanted to weave in on the safety is I've found a lot of power in connecting with water. That's my element. You know, you might experiment with this, and I would love to know. So, like, experiment with this and then message me and let me know. Like, connect with an element. It could be water, earth, fire, air, ether. Like, in the moment of trigger, or like you feel like your safety is being challenged, like, really connect to the element that connects you to your essence the most. I love water because it's kind of a sensory soothing to me. I find that to be really, really calming. Like, I'll just let water run over my hands, and then depending on the level of panic or like my level of experience, I might like lightly tap it on my face. If I'm going through like a real experience, not you know, real in terms of like real or fake, but like if it feels very overwhelming, I might like put myself in the shower, or I might get in the bath, or I might, you know, jump in a body of water. There's something so alchemizing about just like really visualizing whatever is inside, that it like is rinsed away. And you could do like a similar thing with earth. Like, you could put your hands on the ground and just like say, like, you know, take from me what I don't need, and like really like visualize it leaving you physically, emotionally, like, you know, let it alchemize somehow. So you might just play with that. I really love that as a practice, and I just wanted to weave that in. So, you know, if you're wanting more personalized guidance, I also do offer one-on-one, so you can always message me and we can tailor something specifically to what you need. But those might be just little kernels to play with.
Those are powerful. I love that. Yeah, water is my element. I'm also very fascinated by fire, but yeah, water is totally my element. Earlier this morning, so many times in the morning, I'll spray my face with rose water that I just made. And that is like, I don't know, relaxing or rejuvenating to my body, but also my spirit. Like, I feel it deeply in my spirit for water. I love to be anywhere near the beach or the lake. Yeah, water is my element. Yeah, I would love to hear what people have to say of what's their element that keeps them grounded. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. And then where can people get your book?
Yeah, so my book's available on Amazon, so you can get the hard copy, or you could also get it on Kindle. And then if you wanted to have the interactive piece with everything together, so that there's a 3-part video series of guided meditation and a couple different styles of yoga practices. So you could do a 20-minute practice of each 3 on their own, or you could do all 3 together, and that would be a 60-minute practice. As well as there's a music playlist. I love music as a great alchemizer. Like, if I'm in like kind of like an annoyed mood, like I'll like specifically choose music that like provokes that energy, and then I'll like intentionally like change the music to move through it. And so I love music for that. And so I do have music playlists that are connected to each theme of the book. And then there's a journal prompt, so you can free write, or if you prefer to do voice note, or just think about it. So everything's put all together within the Shine Collective, so you can just easily read the story, see the photos, interact with the videos, and you can join into the community that is here. And you can also create your own pods of community on your own if you prefer. I mean, you could practice solo also if you prefer that. So that's all available on my website as well. And yeah, looking forward to being in conversation. It's such a joy. Thank you, Rita.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Namaste. Thank you, Veronique. All right, wellness friends, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for stopping by the Darren Well podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe wherever you hear this episode. Wishing you a fabulous day, my dear. Until next time, keep living, keep loving, and keep daring well. Take care, guys. God bless.